Welcome to another Rugby League Down South podcast. On this week's programme, London Broncos General Manager JASON LOUBSER on the way ahead for the Championship-bound Broncos. We discuss the impact of their relegation with BBC London journalist Phil Parry. The incoming assistant coach Andrew Henderson talks of his Championship specialist knowledge. And after a heavy defeat, head coach Mike Grady talks of more positivity in South Wales. And we've got the biggest scoop of my 7 years covering rugby league in London as I back an interview with the London Broncos kitman STEVE MAGEE, the only club employee who's been there since the first Fulham game in 1980. He's the man who brings on the kicking team. You may well recognise him. He talks to me about his memories of the London Broncos Supporters Association's Hall of Fame inductees. That's to come a little later on. Plenty of your comments too. And on another note, I am thinking of reinstating the Championship podcast next season too with Broncos, now destined for the Championship in 2015. As for your comments, we'll start with this one from Liam on Twitter at Ian Ramsdale. Just listened to hashtag RLDS and it struck me that Rob Purdham seemed very worried about the future of the club, as he talks about at last week's programme. Should we drop into the Championship? He seems to be the only person that thinks maybe relegation is the end for the Broncos. I hope he's wrong. Liam, thank you for your comments. If you want to tweet, you can do at Ian Ramsdale. Use the hashtag RLDS, or you can email rldownsouth@gmail.com. What a week then. London Broncos relegated from the Super League for the first time in its 19-year history. The club's first relegation from the top tier since 1984 when they were Fulham. They'll play in the Championship in 2015, as many expected. A few tweets from former players. Tony Clubb, now at Wigan, saying, gutted to hear that London have been relegated. Really feel for the boys, lots of good friends there. Hopefully they can come straight back up. Chad Randall says a club day, a sad day in the club's history. There is so much potential for a great rugby league club in London. Luke McCarthy Scarsbrook now at St Helens saying gutted that London Broncos, the club that raised me, have been relegated. Hopefully they can regroup and get back to the top flight. And Luke Dawn at Cass, of course, says sad to see London Broncos relegated. Been a lot of hard times, will be tough for the fans to take. Well, as for you, the fans, let's give you the thoughts of the Broncos general manager. It's no secret the club have been planning for life in the Championship, as they had a plan for staying in Super League as well. Well, I sat down for a chat with their new general manager, JASON LOUBSER. He's part of the new management structure that were put in place at the club this year. So while it's the first time that we had an opportunity to talk to him, I thought I'd ask a few questions about his background too. But here the thoughts sound worth mentioning that this is before the weekend's game. Sat down with him on Friday for the BBC London programme we did last week. So these are the thoughts pre-relegation, but I think much, if not everything, of what he said here is absolutely 100% still valid now. So here is the new Broncos general manager, JASON LOUBSER.
This is the first time that we've spoken to you and we've heard from you. There's a new management structure involved at the club at the moment. Just tell us a bit about your background, because you were previously with the club before this new management structure took over.
Yeah, so I joined the club in January 2011 as the finance controller, and I held that position for 3 years. At the start of this year I continued in that position, and then I was asked to take on the role of general manager, which is about March time, which I'm doing now, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it and enjoyed working with Joey, and yeah, things are progressing well.
How different is it to what you were doing before? Because it does seem like it's a step in the other direction, and you've been, I've been trying to talk to you for weeks if not months, and there's meetings galore and all sorts going on.
Yeah, so whilst I've taken on the general manager position, I've continued doing the financial controller position, so I've wearing two hats at the stage, so days seem very short. Lots to do, more meetings to attend, especially up north. So yeah, it's been very enjoyable. I've enjoyed it. New challenge, but yeah, so I'm still continuing the old job and carrying on.
There's been a lot of new things that have gone on with this club over the last sort of 12 months, 18 months or so. This management structure as it is, with a few people working part-time, few days a week and stuff. How has that gone? Because, it's something new that hasn't happened here before.
Yeah, we took the decision to have part-time people, if you like, working for us, coming in a few days a week. We thought at the point where we were in January, that was the easiest way to get things going again. We've had some assistance from the RFL in a couple of positions, which has been great for us. So we thought it was the best way forward. We're certainly looking at 2015 whether we continue with that structure or we start employing people on a full-time basis. That's the next part of the staffing structure. We're getting the coaching structure in place, and we'll be looking at the back office staff next.
It does seem like plans are really well advanced for next year. You obviously deal with on-field and off-field now, but it seems like the club is really in a good position already.
Yeah, I've been working closely with Joey, certainly with coaching staff. This morning we announced Andrew Henderson as the new assistant coach, which is exciting. I've also been working with Joey and David on the playing structure. We've signed a good deal of number of players for next year already, and included in that is a lot of local players. People have come through the club training system, so yeah, it's looking very exciting for next year.
How is David at the moment? Because it must have been a tough year. I mean, it has been a tough year for everyone at the club, and he's for many a year put money in and wanted the success, and in recent years hasn't particularly got it. I mean, he must be disappointed with how this year's going, but can we see that from the money that he's already sort of pledging in terms of player contracts and what's happening next year, that he's fully supportive of what the club's doing?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've presented a budget for next year for us to remain full time, which he's fully behind. We presented a budget based on what the salary cap will be in both Super League and Championship, and he's fully committed to spend pretty close to that budget if we are in the Championship, which is looking more and more likely every week. We can certainly make the top four and look to bounce straight back up to Super League in 2016.
What is the plan for next year? I mean, at the moment we're possibly only a couple of weeks away from it being confirmed that you may be in the Championship next year. You've obviously potentially looked at both plans, but is it more the Championship plan that you're looking at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose in the last month we've probably reverted more and more to the Championship plan, and that's certainly what we're planning for. Is, I suppose you could say, plan A is now the Championship. I think someone told me earlier, I think if Salford win this weekend and we don't, that probably condemns us to the Championship. So yeah, certainly Championship is the plan. As I said, we're committed to training full time. I think we'll be one of 3 or 4 squads only in the Championship training full time, so we hope that that'll certainly help us in pushing for promotion back to Super League.
With that in mind, it does seem like it's a sensible approach. That you've obviously been considering both models, and it's just that one that you're going to end up going with. Yeah,
I mean, salary cap and distributions from RFL make a big difference. So the distribution figure from the RFL is a lot less in Championship. So it's a big commitment from David to allow us to spend up to what the salary cap will be in Championship, with the push to get back to Super League, where obviously the distribution goes up dramatically, which will help us in 2016.
Does it make any difference to any support or any plans that you have here, the fact that you may be in that second tier next year?
No, I don't think so. All the staff are fully behind it. The players we've spoken to are very happy. We've pushed both Championship and Super League in terms of contracts. They committed to coming regardless of what league we're in. So we've had no real negatives. We've obviously lost a couple of players from this year who really want to play in the Super League, which Joey and I have both said from the start that if any player wants to play Super League, we're certainly not going to hold them back. So players have come and spoken to us, we fully accept their reasoning for wanting to leave, and we fully support them.
And what is the plan for the future? The phrase I've heard is that this is a Super League club that may have to spend a year or some time not in the Super League to build to get back there. Is that the long-term vision for the future?
Yeah, certainly. We feel that the Championship will be certainly, it's not where you want to be, but certainly beneficial to the club to rebuilding. We think a good solid year in Championship. We're certainly looking to win more games than we lose. We can try to grow the club again in London back to where it used to be.
One of the big new things for this year was your playing venue and the partnership that you've gone into with Barnet. How's that gone this year? I mean, there's been a few murmurings that it's not always been too rosy, but how is the relationship and your workings with Barnet?
Yeah, to start with was pretty tough. I mean, I'd been here for 3 years, and all those years we've been at the Stoop. I got pretty used to being there. And Roehampton, we all got used to the training venue and the ground. So this year, yeah, it's been a big change for us. New training ground, new playing venue, a few teething problems at the start, but yeah, I think we're getting there. We're improving the feelings we have as it being a home ground, which obviously going to a new venue from the start doesn't feel like that way. We only go there on match days, which also was a bit different. But no, I think we've worked on it, and it's getting better.
And in terms of the future for the relationship and with your workings with Barnet, people have talked about potentially you might not be at the Hive or anything like that. You know, next year you signed a 2-year deal. Is that what you're expecting? Yeah,
we've signed a 2-year deal with the Hive for this year, next year. Same as Underhill, we've signed it to be here for 2 years. We know Underhill is subject to being sold, which we're still waiting for confirmation for. So for the time being, yeah, we certainly going to continue training at Underhill and playing games at the Hive.
And is there any possible of new investment? Because, I mean, David Hughes has said for a few years that, you know, extra investment could be welcome at the club. I mean, at the moment he seems to be happy with him putting the money in. Is he actively looking, or is there potential of new investment in the future? People talked about a partnership with Cleanthos when all this Barnet deal went through.
I'm sure David would certainly look to welcome new investment into the club. At this stage, we're going along with just David as it is. But certainly if there was any further investment to come from elsewhere, we would certainly look at that and see where it fitted into what we're trying to achieve at the club.
And some people have said, you know, if the club goes into the Championship, it could be the beginning of the end, and that there's only a backward sort of movement of the club at the moment. It does seem that the things that you're doing is trying to move the club forward. There is definitely a future there, and not that people are going to give up if the club went down, but you can say that the plan is for this club to continue.
Yeah, I mean, most of the playing contracts are certainly the staff contracts. We're looking to sign people on 2-year deals. So again, the idea is that they'll be here to play in the Championship next year, finish in the top 4, hope to push for promotion, and see us into Super League. So we're certainly not planning on being 1 year in the Championship and then giving up. We're looking for the future, which is why we're signing people on longer term deals.
So that's the general manager of London Broncos, Jason Loubser, and the club's views and thoughts of how they're going to move themselves forward. Still seems that there are a number of things to iron out and sort out for their immediate future, possibly with Barnet, and I think things have been, well, I said on the BBC London programme on the weekend, I think that things have always been a bit tough, because as they are with any new partnership, it's always a bit of a testing time to start with, but there's obviously still things that they've got to change and amend and correct and improve for next year. And I think if you weren't looking at those things, then people wouldn't be overly happy with it, really. As for what conclusions they come to at the moment, it remains to be seen, but we'll await any changes, if any changes, with the Broncos for 2015. I had a mention on Twitter from London Faithful saying, can you mention this? He says, London fans, let's not look down and be in the slumps about next year. Let's look forward to it. Anything can happen. Hashtag in Grimer I trust, he says. A few more of your thoughts on the relegation of the Broncos. Christopher saying, very sad day, but planning for next season can begin in earnest. When they're back on merit, it'll leave no room for moaners. Andrew saying it might do them a power of good. They can see things and get things ready for next season and get fans on side and stop treating them as mugs. Aaron says, I think it's impossible to get promoted in the future, and agreeing, saying the only way it can happen is if they change the competition rules again. She says, very sad day. I remember how we were in 1997 and think, how could it have gone so badly wrong? Your thoughts on Twitter anytime at Ian Ramsdale. Use the hashtag RLDS, or you can tweet, or you can email rldownsouth@gmail.com. Now, with Broncos relegated, the paradox of getting more coverage by non-London media will seem to be emphasised, really. Local coverage set to be hit hard, you'd have thought. Joanna Lester, journalist now down under, having covered London Rugby League for a number of years, says Super League without a London club and expansionist agenda makes it hard to envisage Rugby League ever piercing the UK national consciousness. London Faithful again on Twitter saying the very little radio coverage will be a big hit. Let's hope some local newspapers give the Broncos a little bit of coverage. However, alternatively, if Broncos do end up being promoted, could that be a boost for local coverage? I mean, yes, equally. I suppose if is a big if, London string a few wins together in the Championship, you may see how the media loves a success story in a way. Old Pose on Twitter saying, at Ian Ramsdale, why would the press bother about a team in Edgware in the second level of a minority sport watched by hundreds? Interesting thoughts. And Rob saying on Twitter, I think you're right to be positive. This could be the making of London in professional rugby league. A joined-up approach now needed. Well, as we discuss the future of what may be for London Broncos, I thought I'd give you the thoughts of one of my colleagues at BBC London, Phil Parry. We co-hosted a programme at the weekend, of which you can download now as a BBC podcast, the same as the old feed if you used to subscribe to BBC London Rugby League. I'll add it on the description to this podcast so you can download it, but if you want to find it on a web search, just search for BBC London Rugby League. It'll find you the podcast, and you can listen to the programme from Saturday. But here is the thoughts of Mr. Phil Parry after that programme about the future of the sport in London and what potentially the coverage and the impact may be on a number of levels, and just finally a bit of an apology for the quality of the call as it gets toward the end, but you've got a good few minutes before we get that far. Here is BBC London 94.9 to Phil Parry.
Broncos relegated, there's numerous impacts across the sport, I guess, or particular across the game within London. What do you think that the biggest impact will be?
Well, I suppose the biggest impact is that as far as awareness of the sports in the capital, in the area, it may be diminished somewhat, because obviously the name London just won't feature on the top level of rugby league when it comes to domestic competition, when it comes to club competition, I would imagine. I don't quite know whether the impact of this relegation is worse from a sort of a local point of view than actually the impact of all the confusion at the back end of last season as to whether the club was going to exist, or, what was going to happen. I think none of it is positive, and I think the last 12 months as a whole really would be a 12 months to be forgotten, certainly from a top-level rugby league perspective in London.
Media-wise, Phil, do you think, Broncos in terms of, rugby league and the sport is generally low on the agenda within the capital anyway, and Broncos stories have been mostly done by the mainstream rugby league media, based in the north, but obviously it's nationwide publications or available on the iPlayer Super League show, not broadcast outside of the north. Do you think that obviously they'll do less coverage because they're in a lower division, and there'll be less coverage within London?
Well, as you say, Ian, firstly, when it comes to coverage in London, it's fairly minimal anyway. We've tried our best on BBC London, but for various reasons, we've had constraints as to what we've been able to achieve over the last sort of 6 to 9 months anyway. we still talk about it, we still mention it, but it's certainly not something we've been able to do so much with. You look at sort of newspaper, television outputs within the region down in the south, it's not something that gets mentioned as often. I just think maybe from an image point of view, if you're trying to say that, and we know how big the sport is at grassroots level, how many committed people there are, how many people are playing, it has grown in a junior level, it's grown at a senior level, number of teams that have grown up in the amateur game, that actually just having the fact that those who are maybe only aware of the top levels, even outside of London, even in the north, even in the more, they hate the phrase to be used, but the heartlands, it will just have an effect maybe on how people view it, because they may not be as aware of rugby league taking place at any sort of level. And I think that's a downside to it. There really is, because I think at least with a London side, even an uncompetitive one, or certainly one that wasn't achieving playoffs, even though that they weren't there, they were still getting highlights, they were still getting live games, they still were creating an awareness of the sport is alive and kicking in London. And I suppose the concern would be that awareness, even if it was not as extensive as we'd like it, will maybe be somewhat diminished.
I guess it's probably worth mentioning that Sky Sports Television will continue to cover, or will pick up the Championship from next year in terms of how they will cover things, because of course when it comes to the middle eight and etc. later on in the season, it becomes much more important to them. So I guess it still continues to be their product as such. But in terms of the playing of the game, from what you gathered doing the programme on Saturday, how do you think the amateur or the lower levels will be affected at all? Because there's one argument to say that they won't have the inspiration to, a team in the Super League to aspire to that top level within their grasp, as in their geographical area. They'll have to move somewhere to get that. But two, there's an argument to say that there will be very little impact because the game is sustaining itself and really relies very little on the top flight club at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. I think you summed it up. You've answered my question, or you answered your question. I think the main talking point, and we've talked about it for years really, about why it's important, especially in more recent times, when really the senior side, the Super League side, has not been able to achieve much on the national scale, has not been getting into playoffs, has not really been progressing even in Challenge Cup runs. What it does, though, is it allows what's called the pathway, an opportunity for players, and we know what the pool of talent in London, the South East, and the South as a whole is extensive. You just look at a number of the players who have, graduated through London and are playing their games elsewhere, but because they've been given that route, because they don't have to move away as a teenager, because there is an opportunity to come through maybe some of the junior clubs, some of the, now Championship 1 clubs, and still get an opportunity then to push their way through. It's a big choice, I think, for maybe a 16, 17, 18-year-old to decide to up sticks and move 200 miles, 250 miles up north, when there was an opportunity before. And that could be a negative. Whether long-term someone else, another club, because of a void in the market, because of an opportunity to try and fill that position, maybe another club comes through with a plan, with a structure, which creates those pathways. But again, we are talking about that. That will take time. That's not going to happen overnight. And I know that you spoke to Rob Purdom last week, and Purdo's view was that relegation would actually be cataclysmic, really, as far as the Broncos are concerned. And that team, that club, or team, because, again, a discussion whether it's a team or a club, will actually disappear. And instead of actually, coming forward again, using this as an opportunity to restructure, replan and go again, his fear was that actually it would disappear. So it would take a long time for another club to actually take its place within the current structure. The positives are that, if the right people are making the right decisions, then the London Broncos, the Barnet Broncos, whatever they're going to be in the future, the senior rugby league side that wants to challenge for Super League status again, if they get it right, if they put a plan in place, could push forward in a shorter space of time. And it's how that void is filled. And I'm not saying that the grassroots would ever stop. You just look at all sorts of sports that are played that don't have national recognition or don't get too much media recognition, but people go out and play them. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist as a sport, but longer term, where do the people who really, really excel? Do they get lost to the game? Full stop. Your your McCarthy, Scarsbricks, your Dan Sargentons, do they actually get lost to the game because there isn't that structure to push them through?
You mentioned there as well, one thing that we talked a lot about on BBC London on Saturday was the plan, and putting things in for the future. I think I remember saying when Broncos secured a future and announced they were going to play at the Hive and a link with Barnet, etc., that the biggest disappointment would be if they didn't make the most of this opportunity. And whether they have or haven't, I guess is maybe up for debate at the moment. It's been a tough year. I'm not really sure how it could have gone, in some ways much better or in some ways much worse. But then you look at the situation and think, well, if they have been relegated and they're going to have play in the Championship and they're signing up players for next year and they're recruiting Andrew Henderson, who's knowledgeable of the Championship, I guess the big disappointment will be there is a potential here for them to use this as a positive and to build for the future, and the disappointment will be if they don't do that.
Absolutely, and the way to do that is when you put a plan in place, Ian, is to not have a 12-month plan. There seems to have been too much short-termism, and I think what you need to have is you need to have a long-term view. You need to have, yes, a short-term view. What do we want to achieve in the next 12 months? But as well as that, you need to look at it and say, what do we want to achieve in the next 3 years? Where do we want to be within 10 years' time? And yet again, we alluded to it at the weekend, and our conversations you have and other people will have, is that there is still insecurity about the club as to where its medium to longer term future may well be. Now, I think someone has to take it by the scruff of the neck and say, right, this is what we're going to do with the club. This is where we're going to take it. This is what we need to achieve it. If it means some expediency, i.e., well, we'll be here for a little time, but the long-term view is we want to be in our own home. We'll have some sort of place that we've got some revenue streams that are not just match day revenue streams. Then put that plan in place and achieve that. Actually have a target. There just seems to have been this short-termism, from one year to the next to the next. If you really want to achieve it, I think there needs to be some sort of, you look at other sports and look at AFC Wimbledon. AFC Wimbledon were formed over 10 years ago now because of the what was happening with their football club. They are now moving closer to getting to a stage where they may have their own football ground again back in Plough Lane. But by the time they get there, it will be almost 20, it could be 20 years from having formed their own club. But they always set about their target that that's what they wanted to do, and they've been working towards it. Have a target, have a plan, have a long-term viewpoint, and stop this short-termism and just move, or just accept that it's not going to work. But you can't just stumble from one season to the next. It hasn't worked, Ramo. It hasn't worked, and for it to work, there has to be some sort of short, medium, long-term planning. But that planning has to have some real drive. Someone has to drive it forward.
So those are thoughts of Phil. As I say, if you want to listen to the BBC programme which we referred to, there you can listen on the BBC podcast pages. Just search BBC London Rugby League podcast, or look at the description in this podcast. However you're listening, you should be able to find it there. Broncos head coach Joey Grimer saying part of the plan is confirmed that 23 of this season's 31 players will not be at the club next season. I did think as well, I wonder how many of Broncos' squad from this year will be in Super League next season. It'll be an interesting number to keep your eye on. Solomona off to Castleford, many more players as well off to other Super League clubs. For some reason, just not happening when they're all together in one place in London, and it hasn't been that way for a couple of years now. Another couple of tweets from London Faithful, let's get these out of the way, saying, I think the club has ambition and a plan. Some good Championship players would want to go full-time with London. Henderson, as an assistant, is extremely important. He knows the competition, the level we need to play at. And then Scott was saying, you'll be a target for many at this level. Some will want to prove that they are better. It's going to be a tough league. As for a few of those points, one person who may make it slightly easier next season is the new assistant coach in Andrew Henderson. For me, a smart move. Championship knowledge, wants to coach, very enthusiastic, and a top bloke, having worked with him on the Premier Sports gigs in the last few years. So as the news was announced, I gave Hendo a call to find out why, like with many people who join the Broncos, he's coming down to London, why he's going to give his services to the club, and what he feels he can bring in the future. As we mentioned, his championship knowledge could be vital for them now next year. And just a note, again, this interview done before Broncos were relegated, just for time purposes. But here is the new assistant coach for 2015 at London Broncos in Andrew Henderson, currently the head of youth at Sheffield Eagles.
Very excited. Very excited to be part of the Broncos' future. I think personally it's a fantastic opportunity for me to sink my teeth into, and I'm just really looking forward to what I think is going to be a bright future ahead for London. I know there's probably a few doom and gloomers out there, but I think speaking to Joey and the sort of passion that he has for the game and for the club, and the sort of plans that he wants to execute, certainly with me being part of it, are really, really exciting and certainly ones that I believe in. So, looking forward to it.
And how's it all come about? Because Darren Higgins, who I think had the role before you were head of youth at Sheffield Eagles, is now working in the same role at Broncos. Has that sort of helped bring you down?
It probably has helped to some degree, but I think basically Joey was in touch with a mutual friend of ours back in Australia, Darren Mooney, who works at the Cronulla Sharks. He's the former general manager there. I can't think what his new title is there now, but he's back there at the Sharks. And Joey just spoke to him, and I think it was Darren Mooney that kind of alluded Joey to me and the potential that I could be available, and it kind of went from there. Obviously, Darren Higgins being there certainly, I'm sure, would have given me a good rap. Well, I hope he did anyway. So that's where it kind of all started from, and then obviously the club made contact, and we've been fortunate enough to come up with a deal that's suitable for both parties, and I look forward to joining in the close season of this year.
You talk about possible doom and gloom, but what is it that attracted you to the position? The positive aspects of it.
The vision of the club moving forward is what it was for me. I think there's a great opportunity down there, and I think from what I'm hearing, I spoke to people at the RFL about there's a lot of people now involved in the community side of the game there. The numbers are growing, with people playing the game down there. So I think there's a real good opportunity that the London club, if they get it right, can certainly sustain itself with an influx of talent coming through. And there's plenty of good athletes there, and they just need quality coaching. And part of the sort of, I suppose, the vision now of the club with Joe and myself is that we want to rebuild and re-establish those links with the community clubs. We want the community clubs and the fans to be proud of the London Broncos. I think there's a bit of that at the moment, that I don't think the people down there are proud of the Broncos, and we want to restore that kind of that pride within the club, and get the sort of community coaches developed, get the players developed, which obviously helps us from a performance point of view as more players be able to come into our performance pathway. And I just think we want to get that good feel factor back happening at the Broncos, and I think with the quality of personnel that we're looking to recruit and bring in for the next couple of years, we're going to create a very, very honest, hard-working culture that have ambition and want to succeed and want to win. And it's all about building that kind of ethos right throughout the club, not just about the first team. It's getting that right from the first team to the academy, through to the scholarship, and then feeding into the community clubs and building those relationships. And then, like you said, hopefully then we have a community club in the London Broncos that is that people are proud to say not only do they represent, but are proud to be involved and associated with. And hopefully then as a club we can aspire the next generation of players to want to play for London and stay in London.
And you've had a long and illustrious playing career in the Championship. It looks highly likely that Broncos are going to be in that division next year. I guess your knowledge and experience of being in that division and knowing what it takes to succeed will be valuable really to what the Broncos will need next year.
Oh, it's certainly going to help. Obviously, Joey's only been in the country, this year, so he's still probably getting familiar with all the Super League sort of players and style of players of each team in that division. So, it's certainly going to help with my knowledge at this level. Certainly being in this level for a number of years. I know the grounds, I know the facilities that we'll be going to play in. I'll have a handle certainly on certain teams and who are the players to watch, their strengths and weaknesses and things like that. So, I'll certainly be able to pass on a lot of that information to Joey, and hopefully, like I said, we come up with the right plans to be able to get the results on those days. But yeah, it's definitely going to help. I've also had a lot of success at this level of the game too, so I know what it takes to win at this level, and hopefully I can bring that on board with the Broncos and give ourselves a real chance, of getting not only in the top 4, but obviously getting into that middle 8 and having a crack at it.
What do you think the Championship division will be like next year? There's 2 teams coming down from Super League. There's a few being cut from the bottom of the Championship. I mean, it's going to be an ultra competitive division, and you already see what teams like Lee are doing this year.
Absolutely. It's going to be a very competitive league. Obviously, I know that probably ourselves and Bradford will be going full-time. Lee have obviously announced that they will be going full-time as a team next year. I don't know what the situation is with Featherstone at the moment, but potentially they could be full-time. And there may be 1 or 2 others, you just don't know, may decide to go full-time as well. So I think it's going to be very competitive. We can't underestimate the part-time teams either. A lot of the part-time teams now, the standard has risen at this level, and they're better prepared. They've got more knowledge. They've got more S&C support. They've got better facilities. And so again, even though they might be part-time, there's still going to be difficult opposition to face. And what you tend to find, Ramo, is when you do come up against some of these the sides, they raise their game. So it's going to be a challenge for all of our players. Certainly the players that are probably coming out of the Super League and coming down to this level for the first time, because it's a totally different environment. It's a different level of rugby league football. Like I said, the facilities that you're going to be playing at are going to be vastly different, and they've got to get their head around that and prepared to be professional and disciplined if they're going to get results, because some of the teams that we come up against may not be as skillful as we are, or maybe as fit or as strong, but they certainly can certainly hurt you on the day if you disrespect them. So we've got to make sure we're very well prepared. But I think certainly with the facilities that we're going to have in place and the support team and the quality of players that we'll have, I think we'll be in a very good position.
What do you think about your prospects or the future of working with Joey Grima? He seems to be a very positive man who has a great vision for what he wants to do with the Broncos in the future.
Yeah, look, the great thing about Joey when I spoke to him and met with him, he's got a lot of similar characteristics to me. He's very enthusiastic. He's very passionate. He wants to succeed. He's very ambitious, but again, he shares a similar philosophy about the one club sort of culture. It's not just about the first team. Yes, we've got to get things right in there, but we've got to get things right from the bottom up as well, and also spread out into the community games. So he's more about we need to not only strengthen what we're doing within the first team environment, but we've got to strengthen the rugby league down south, so to speak. And I'm really big on that, because at the end of the day, those community clubs are going to be the future. The players there are going to be the future of the London Broncos coming into our system, and we've got to make sure that we've got it right at every level of the club within, and also, like I said, extending that further out to the community clubs as well. So I'm really big on that. So I'm glad that he supports that as well. And like I said, we're looking at, like you said, I suppose you've used the word rebuild. I suppose it's more about rebuilding some of the links that may have been broken, re-establishing those and strengthening those, and then obviously again looking to change the culture within the club, because that needs to change if we're going to be successful and build a winning team.
Good chat with Hendo. He's a nice bloke, and he'll go very well with the positive atmosphere that Broncos are trying to generate and cultivate with Joey Grima and the new bods for next year. And I think he'll be absolutely very key and vital to what they want to do in 2015, and his knowledge and experience will be key. Richard on Twitter saying very sad that Hendo's leaving the Eagles, top bloke and a huge boost for London. Scott saying great coup for the Broncos getting Hendo in. We've certainly had our money's worth. Very passionate and gives 100% to anything he does. And Kieran saying I hope London don't take any more of our staff. Seriously, a great move for Hendo and London. We'll miss him. Of course, Broncos taking Darren Higgins as well as the head of youth. He's now at the Broncos, so they've done some development work in Sheffield. They're now going to be doing some development work at another Championship club, but this time in London, to see what they can do there. And as we go down the divisions, then let's drop down to Championship 1 and hear from the South Wales Scorpions. A tweet from Mike Grady, their head coach, saying, right, best get a move on, can't get beat by 70 plus points and expect to get away with it. Scorpions Rugby League, we will put things right this week, he said. Heavy defeat to Hunslet, as he mentioned, at the weekend, but it's far from doom and gloom, he tells me. Here is the head coach of the South Wales Scorpions, Mike Grady.
Mike, all season we've been saying how tough and how close Championship 1 is. Does Saturday's result show quite how tough it can be at times?
Yes, that's probably the best way to describe it. It was a very tough day at the office. I have said previously you've got to be on your game to come away with something, and if you're hard on your game, as teams have proved, you can get the points at the end of the day. But on Sunday against Hunslet, we just weren't on the game, and Hunslet were, and they obviously took full advantage of that. How
difficult is it in weeks where you have such a heavy defeat like that?
It's tough. It really is tough. We're lucky. Well, I'm lucky myself. The club is we've got a good group of lads, which I've said all year. The morale's good. They want to be there. They want to play with each other. They want to train. So it's just making sure that smile's still on the face this week, and hopefully get a reaction this week against Hemel. And
let's flip it round the other way. How good were Hunslet?
They were very good. They've got a very experienced side on paper. They were very good. They executed everything. It was probably one of them days where everything clicked for them. Although we weren't at the races, everything seemed to click for Hunslet, and it just shows why they are one of the three favourites, along with York and Oldham at the start of the year to go up. They were on fire that day, and full credit to them.
Those traditional clubs that you mentioned there, at the start of the season, everyone was saying, they're favourites to, finish in the top few spots of the league. I guess for a club like South Wales, and pretty, you know this more than anyone, having recently arrived this year, it shows you sort of where you want to be in the future. They've been around for years, haven't they? And I guess that's one thing in particular that South Wales want to do, and be around for a while.
Yeah, it does set a benchmark to the rest, and it shows people what you can achieve if you are here for a while. So we have spoke about it. It's not a short term fix. It's a long term fix, and I'm hoping within 2, 3, 4 years maybe that we can be as competitive, and hopefully things off the field will mirror them clubs as well. So as you say, it's about being here for a while and making sure we're going in the right direction and trying to get where them clubs are.
Are you enjoying this year?
I am. A few people ask me that because I think people look at the results and say, "Oh, he enjoyed it," but I love it. I love match day. I can't wait for the game each week. The results, they're not as they should be, but that's part of the job, and that's what I love about the job. I've got to look at them and see why they're not there and why they're up and down, why they're this, why they're that. I love that part of the job, and each week, as I say, I can't wait for Sunday, and I'm looking forward to Hemel this week.
I've had many chats with the Broncos coach Joey Grimer about week on week how difficult it's been for him and how things have been as they continue to lose games in the Super League. But his positivity at times is quite astonishing. But I think he draws the positivity from other areas of the game, away from those Super League results. And is it something similar with you in that, of course, it's disappointing. You don't want to win games, but the positivity comes from everything else that surrounds you.
Yeah, I've listened to a few interviews with him, and he is a really positive character, and you've got to listen to things like that, and he's experienced, and I try and do a similar thing as you say. I'm always positive. I'm generally a positive person, and if I was downbeat, my players would be downbeat, and it's a knock-on effect, isn't it? So I've got to keep smiling, make sure the players are smiling, which they do. They enjoy training. We're looking forward to it tonight. Can't wait for the weekend, and you've got to keep going. If you had a mentality where you just quit if you weren't winning, you'd struggle, wouldn't you? So there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm looking forward to it. It's a 2, 3, 4 year plan, and I just can't wait to get stuck into it for the rest of the season, finish off with a bit of pride, and then get kicking on into next year.
You talk about that long-term plan, and we talked about the long-term plan with Broncos on a programme on BBC London about sort of quite how much you can do when things off the field aren't as stable as you would like. You're doing your best in the role at the moment. You're enjoying yourself. How difficult is it to consider the future on what you might do?
It's a tough one, really. Off the field, it's tough, and it's probably the same with London Broncos off the field. But you've got to take a step backwards, haven't you? That's what he said, to take 2 forward. That's what this year we've stripped it all back. There's a change of ownership. There's new players. There's the players are South Wales based, which has never been before. I'd say 99% of the squad are. So I think London are probably in a similar situation. They're down in the Championship now, so they'll strip things back. And I think he said he's releasing 23, didn't he, Joey? So he'd be doing exactly the same. He'd be stripping it back, going again, and I'm sure they'll bounce back as well. Hopefully, we'll be in a similar situation where we can compete at the right end of the table in a year or two.
And what about you personally? I know it's difficult to say at times, but I mean, would you like to continue in this role?
Oh, yeah, I love it. I enjoy the role. And as I said before, it seems funny saying it when you're getting beat week in, week out, and people must think, oh, he must be under pressure, he must be this. It's a challenge, isn't it? If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. So week in, week out, I've got a challenge to try and improve things on the previous week and go from there. Just put the little building blocks in place, and at the end of the line, hopefully I'll be able to look back and think I'm glad I stuck it out and give it a good go.
And I guess it shows you as well the character of your side when you have a week like this week, and you want to then get the best out of them the following week, to see how they recover, to see how they cope with it. These weeks happen, and they happen to many of the better teams as well. You've got to get over it, and it's all part of, I guess, their learning process.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because obviously I was down after the game, 74 points, and then I did look at a few results, and London, as we just been speaking about, I think they got 70 put on them. I think Oxford were 58, so what was that? There's 16 odd points less than us. So the results do happen. I'm not getting downbeat about it. It happened against York away, 76-0 I think it was. So at least we were 2 points better than that. But since that York one, we improved, and this is what we've got to do again. We've got to regroup. We've got to go again. Look what went wrong, and then hopefully put it right next week against Hemel.
And I guess as much as the lads don't want it as well, if ever a game starts slipping away from them again, you sort of get flashbacks, don't you? And you think, right, come on, we've got to stop this.
Yeah, you probably do get little flashbacks and think, I don't want another repeat. I've been fortunate; it's only happened twice this year. I wouldn't like it to happen again, but already the lads they've given me a response already on the evening of the game. Yesterday, I spoke to a number of the players, and they all are upset. They're disappointed in themselves, and they're looking forward to bouncing back this week.
How easy is it to consider next year and what may happen in terms of playing structure and squads and stuff like that? From a Championship 1 point of view, it can be difficult, I guess, with turnover of players, but can you start planning for that? Are you looking at that now?
I'm hoping to start planning within the next week or so. It has been top of the agenda, to be honest. Myself, my assistant Paul have started talking about it. Hopefully the playing staff, there's not going to be much change within the playing staff, maybe adding one or two here and maybe one or two will leave, because we're looking for stability, and that's what I've banged on about all year. The league, in terms of the league, it's going to be a lot tougher because 5 are coming down, aren't they, from the Championship, so it's going to be a lot tougher. I'm looking forward to having a full pre-season instead of 3 weeks. I'm just looking to work with the lads for them 3 or 4 months before the season starts, and hopefully, as I say, compete at the right end of the table.
I don't know whether this is probably the right word to use, but it's going to be a bit crazy in Championship 1 next year, isn't it? 5 teams coming down, Coventry coming in as well. I mean, you're going to end up playing from the 1st of Jan to the 30th of December.
I'm not sure what the structure is yet. I know there's going to be 14 teams, as you say. I don't know how they're going to do. I think there was 3 proposed agendas for the season, but I'm not sure which one they've picked. And they're also on about bringing a cup competition as well with Championship 1, so there'll be a few games, won't there? Is there the potential then you won't play everyone twice? I think that's how it's looking at. Someone's mentioned 16 games in a cup competition, so obviously that's got to be finalised. I do think that the clubs meet with the Championship meeting every month, so I presume that'll be finalised before the end of the season. Then we'll know where we're going. But it is it's going to be a different feel to it in the facts. 5, 6 new teams next year, so looking forward to it. But the bigger size league is only 9 this year, so it's been a bit inconsistent. You've had weeks off here, weeks off there, so hopefully a bit more consistent next year, and we'll see how it goes.
He's another of the positive people in rugby league, trying his best to do what he can, and if they can embark on a long-term plan, as with many of these clubs, and when we talk about development, we mentioned it with Broncos, and there's so many similarities between all the clubs in terms of the generic development and things like that, then I'm sure they will hopefully have a positive future to come. We mentioned last week the game they're having at Cardiff Arms Park as well, 27th of July, if my memory is correct. So, things are, progressing and doing well in South Wales. If you missed that chat with Ian Golden, very worth a listen from last week's podcast programme. And finally, then we come to the biggest coup of my 7 years covering rugby league in London. Absolutely 100% true fact. I've secured an interview with the London Broncos kit man, Steve Magee. You might think, well, that's not much of a coup, really. Well, he's been at the club since it was founded in 1980. He's the only member of staff that's continued to be there in their history. And let me tell you, he doesn't give interviews at all, stroke very easily. I ask him every year, probably a couple of times, to sit down, chat with him about the history and things like that, and he would always very politely decline the interview requests, generally saying something along the lines of, it's not about me, the players are the interesting people, you should talk to them. Now, when the opportunity came around of the Hall of Fame, obviously, Steve Magee, the man who knows all of the players that have come through the door of that club. So I thought, well, it's worth a request. I spoke to him, and he was willing to give his thoughts on the Hall of Fame inductee. So here is a very, very rare interview with the London Broncos kitman, Steve Magee. Very proud of myself for having secured this interview. And as I said before, excuse me, he's the man that brings on the kicking tee. Well recognised at many a Super League club, not just by Broncos fans as well, when he brings on that kicking tee for the Broncos. But we sat down to talk about the Hall of Famers and the inductees, and we thought we'd go through. And I tried as well, as you will hear. Steve doesn't particularly like talking about himself, so I tried to weave in a few questions which mentioned his background and his history, as well as these players. So hopefully you get a bit more about him as well in this interview. And there's a little bit at the end as well where we chat about his time. So I hope you enjoy this very, very rare interview with the London Broncos kitman, Mr. Steve Magee.
Stevie, first of all, thank you for talking to us. And just in case people don't know, just give us a bit of background for you personally. I mean, we're going to run through these Hall of Famers, but just tell us how long you've been with this club and obviously why you know some of these players so well.
For me sins, I was working at Fulham Football Club, and the founder of the rugby league in London, or the modern day rugby league in London, with respects to those that had gone before in the 30s. But in 1979, he told us that we were going to have rugby league at Craven Cottage.
And who was this?
Mr. Ernest Clay, owner chairman of Fulham Football Club at the time. My response, I always remember, was righto, Mr. Clay, because that's how I answered most of his ideas that he had at the time, and it turned into what's become a 34-year association with the place because of his vision of having it's a given now, but back then it wasn't, where he was utilising a football ground or a sports stadium many more times than just the games that the football were playing. And although it's been done many times since, back then it was quite something, and we were one of the first to utilise the stadium more times, and it was his vision that the second sport was going to be rugby league, and this is a continuing story from back then, so 35 years ago.
Well, as you mentioned, just 35 years. I think I'm right in saying you're the only person that's still here from the original Fulham days. Is that right? I think there's no one else that's gone through that time.
No, unfortunately, for one reason or another, there isn't anyone left. There's a couple, and I really don't see enough of supporter land to find out how many, but I'm aware of some people that have stuck through thick and thin in supporter land, but no, unfortunately,
not from the club.
Not club associated, no, team associated.
Well, let's go with the London Broncos Supporters Association Hall of Fame and the inductees. Like I say, you've seen many of these turn up for training every day. You've been with them on match days, home and away. So I just thought you'd be the perfect man to get your memories. I mean, if we go back to that original Fulham team and the first man that was in there, Reg Bowden, the half-back for the very first Fulham team, what are your what are your memories, I should say, of him?
It was very different back then. Memories are limited, unfortunately, of the first 4 or so years of the London team, because they turned up at the ground at Craven Cottage as an away side, because they were based in the north, predominantly in Widnes, and would travel down on the day, sometimes on the occasionally overnights in Watford, but we saw them just arrive, play the game, and then really enjoy themselves for an hour and a half, 2 hours afterwards. part of the attraction of the league for me was the social side. There was this group of blokes that would come play hard and then almost party hard afterwards, which was something that was alien in the football world, and I enjoyed that side of things. Having a pint with, if I was lucky, with the Reg Bowdens, certainly with the Harry Beverleys and the Ian Van Bellens of this world, and that was a great attraction. Work was put on standby. We can wait until the bus pulls out, and then I'll go back to work after that. But happy memories of that, but not in-depth memories, because it was just a fleeting visit each home game for those years where they were based at Craven Cottage.
When I mentioned this list to you after the Wigan game at the Hive, you were reading off a few names of who you thought maybe should be on there, or who you'd heard was on there. Hussein Mbaki was, I think you had a nickname for him, didn't you?
Well, Hussein, with respect to that whole list, was one of the closer people that I worked with of that period back at Fulham, because Hussein much travelled and what have you, but he had to hold down a job, and as well as his rugby, like so many of them, the full-on professional era came later with the advent of Super League, but his role was meant to be, but we didn't get a great deal out of him, was meant to be as an assistant on the ground staff at Craven Cottage, and we'd get a little bit out of him, but his day was spent jogging round the field and jogging up and down the terracing, etc., keeping himself fit, and of course we were quite happy to turn a blind eye to that because of the talents of the man on field come game day, but I like referring to him as the King of Morocco, because he had that sort of regal air about him, and he was a very, very well respected man, and I'm sure still is in his home country. Only a pity that I haven't seen him for a few years. He was a regular visitor at the Stoop of 2-3 seasons ago, but I haven't seen him. I just hope that he's in good health and still promoting his beloved game and his beloved country.
We jump a few years then, I guess, and going up to Scott Roskell as the next man. What are your memories of him?
Scott would be for my memory, a terrific lad, fantastic, and been fortunate to catch up with him many times in later years on his visits to London from his newfound home in New York City. But Scott was one of those that bridged the gap between the part-time having to find a job as well as playing, and then the full-on era, the early years of the named Super League. So cut it both in the part-time and in the full-time full-on professional game. Terrific player, and happily scoring tries for fun.
Now on match days, you're often seen by the fans in particular, taking the kicking tee on after the tries have been scored. You must have been busy when Mark Johnson around. He's the next man on the list.
Yes, only after he'd done his bit, obviously.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Because his job was done. Because after he'd scored, one of the greats in my book, Johnny Gallagher, would then add the two. He never missed with his pile of sand. No tea back in those days. It was a pint pot of slightly wetted sand. And you knew when we'd scored plenty of tries, because there was little sandcastles dotted all around the field. But Mark Johnson, with his, from memory, 43 tries in a year, is one record I think will remain for quite a while. But he was in a wonderful side, scoring tries for fun. If he wasn't scoring, then his mate next door to him in the centres, Logan Campbell was, or Mark Riley at 7. fabulous team, and Mark was the sort of one that got the plaudits for scoring the tries that he did, quite rightly.
And now we get to three names. I think that no people really argue with who should be in the Hall of Fame. We'll start with Peter Gill. I mean, a man that did tremendous things for this club.
Peter was one of those that was tireless, not just on the field but off it, doing all that he could to promote London RL, the Broncos, and you say quite rightly, is up there. When the 7 was suggested, how hard is it, obviously, to pick 7, 10, 20 out of the hundreds that have played, but I think anyone that has seen the last maybe 20 years, 15 years perhaps of London RL would have the likes of Peter Gill in their top 3, I'm sure. Terrific club man, and terrific all round bloke, and lovely family man. Just a good fella.
Well deserving of being on there, as is the next guy, Mr. Steele Retchless. I mean, he holds one of the most impressive Super League records, never mind a club record. But again, a man who really, when you talk about the history of London Rugby League, his name isn't too far away, is it?
Steele, the record I presume you're alluding to is his tackles record, which I think still stands, although there's a question mark over it. Dear old Chad Randall claimed it about a season and a half ago, but I think that was over 3 or 4 games that he managed to get 66 in. Terrific effort from Steele that day against Bradford, that was up in Edinburgh. But when someone can rack up 30 plus, perhaps 40 in a game, they've had a terrific game. So quite what he was doing that day to rack up 66, perhaps only he knows. But credit to him for that, and also credit for being the only person to have played 200 plus games for London. It is a huge achievement. 2 people, the aforementioned Chad Randall, unfortunately,
almost got there,
his injuries at the back end of his time in London stopped him from getting towards that total, and Rob Purdham ditto with 1 or 2 injury problems and the like. At his towards the end of his time in London, could have got there, but I think Steele wants to keep that record, and he's got a bit of a jinx on anyone who gets anywhere near. So 202 for Steele, and fully deserved spot in the inaugural Hall of Fame.
I wonder if any young Londoners at the moment might go on to break that record if they're to stay with the club for many a year, but we'll see. It's an impressive record, and you mentioned there Rob Purdham almost getting near that number of appearances, but a man who, I guess, sort of latterly playing of all the list of the Hall of Fame, is very fresh in the mind of many fans, but basically gave his career to London, didn't he, to do good in the capital?
Absolutely, and again, like them all, terrific bloke with it, and he was the team for a while, a fantastic leader on and off the field, great depth of feeling for the game in London. And also for all the blokes that he was representing as captain, he really was a leader, and terrific bloke, and once again, you cannot argue, and anyone that's seen him play couldn't argue either that he's fully merited his spot in the first 6 or 7 that the Supporters Association have named.
So we've got 7 on that list now. How do you think they've done generally? I mean, what did you initially think of the list, and your thoughts on the Hall of Fame in general and the idea?
Well, I think we've said, haven't we, how hard it is when there's 500 and more players that have donned the jersey. I was asked a few years ago, London RL was 30 years young, and they said, name your all-time side. Well, I tried, but I ended up naming 3. And splitting it to the formative years, the middle years, and the modern era, and it just shows just how hard it is. But that is a fair selection. That is a good representation of the early period, the middle years, as it were, and Robert Burden with the bringing up the almost to the current day, but. As hard as it is, there are still, names that crop up, and you think, well, is there a spot for them in the? Hopefully, the Hall of Fame will expand and they'll get their chance. But I'm thinking of people perhaps like Luke Dawn, top try scorer. By a mile all time. Dennis Moran, who is top try scorer for the whole competition, the whole of Super League, 2 successive years. That they didn't get a chance, and top of the head, thinking of who I believe are massive signings and massive influences in London, such as Johnny Timu, Tony Martin, Richie Barnett, Carl Hammond, Mark Riley. Sam Stewart, Johnny Gallagher, Steve Roslin. You could go on. I said it wasn't easy, didn't I? And nor is it. But each of those have got the merit to be listed with the likes of the lads that have been. But saying that, I also think that a Hall of Fame, if you're talking of London RL, which it represents, could also include people off field. There is, key figures, massive figures that have played a part to ensure that London is still putting a side out on the field. The fellas actually play the game and get the credit, fair play. But there are. There's a few that should, in my book, for what it's worth, be considered for inclusion at the same time. And mentioned before, but the founder, whose vision it was that there should be RL in London, without that vision, nothing would have existed. So a spot on the Hall of Fame for Mr. Clay, I would go for. And then key people that I feel have brought the level up to what it is now. Otherwise, we'd still be, with respect, playing lesser rugby if there hadn't been individuals progressing on and off field values. Would be the likes of Ross Strudwick, Tony Gordon. And in more recent times, Tony Ray, whose contribution as both administrator and coach has seen us get to the levels that people are used to. So off field contribution as well as on field. Let's hope that the organisers and the lads that have put together the inaugural Hall of Fame get a chance to expand it and grow the initial 7, but fair play to them to have come up with the idea and seen it through. It's probably long overdue.
Like you say, many more names that could, and I'm sure we'll see many of those inducted into the Hall of Fame as it continues, hopefully, alongside the club for many more years to come. And I thank you, Stevie, for talking to us. I mean, you obviously love this club. You've been here so long. It means a lot to you, doesn't it, really? I mean, I know that doing an interview, a media interview, isn't necessarily your cup of tea, is it, really? But, you know a lot about this club, you know this club, and you want it to succeed as well, better than anyone else.
Yeah, you'd like to see some success. We have been a long way off of being where we really want to be for too long, and it looks like this year we're going to have to take our medicine and drop out the top flight for, well, we trust 1 year, but we'll take that and bounce back. But for everybody that's stuck with it, I think that a happier few years on and off the park is deserved by all for sticking with it and putting up with what's been a rather miserable, not just this year, but rather miserable, perhaps 4, 5 or 6 years, where there's been not a great deal of of the success that you strive for. There's not been a great deal of it to show for all the efforts. So we'll treat this year as a bit of a blip and bounce back and starting next year, all being well.
And just finally turn a few of your own words back on yourself in terms of, these are on the field names, they're in the Hall of Fame, but you wanted to credit people off the field as well. I know that your efforts and your face in particular, people who've watched this side in Super League for the last 19 years of seeing you running on with the kicking tee, and you're part of this club as much as anyone else. I know that a lot of people have always wanted me to do an interview with you and have said, can you talk to the kit man STEVE Magee? And I've always asked you, haven't I, every season, and said, will you give us a chat about your memories and your history? I mean, it's been a great opportunity to do it for the Hall of Fame, but also it's good to hear your thoughts on the club, and I think a lot of people would like to thank you for your off the field work as well, for what you've done over the few years. You might consider it as incidental and just something and what you do, but I think other people think you've done a tremendous job, and I'd like to say thank you on their behalf.
Well, kind words, probably not merited, but kind words, and thanks to anyone who thinks that. Thank you.
So that's the London Broncos kit man in STEVE Magee. Couple of tweets that I had having announced it on Twitter that I was going to be talking to him. Adam saying, brilliant, looking forward to hearing it. Cult hero, even to fans of other clubs. He was the first bloke my dad asked me about when all the trouble happened in November. Held in high regard in the South Stand, says Adam. Thank you for that. At Ian Ramsdale on Twitter. Phil saying, would he sign for Wire? I don't know. He's been 34, 35 years at Broncos at the moment. Alexander saying, is he the guy who brings on the kicking tee for London? I said, exactly. He said, finally, a name to the face. Stevie Magee. Even if it reminds me of comic book guy from The Simpsons. We'll definitely listen to that one, Alexander. I hope you've enjoyed that interview. John Keys, the father of Joe Keys, who's the latest debutant for London Broncos, saying, Magee, their main man, #Broncos stalwart. And Stevie Owen, a man who's been involved, he works for Sky Television at the moment, on boots and all, but Steve saying, that's brilliant, great effort, Rammer, well done, great man Stevie, but always very humble and wanting to praise the others. Phil Jones, formerly the head of youth now at Warrington, saying, brilliant that you got the interview with the main man, Steve Magee. Hope you asked the story of why he has a ponytail. I forgot that one, Phil, so I'll have to add that to the next programme. And MK Wolves on Twitter saying, asking about his altercation with the Carlisle sideline under the tenure of Gary Grinkett. Well, I'll have to ask him about that on another day. And Danny Ward says, this deserves a 2-hour prime slot on BBC One. I did pitch for it, but unfortunately they didn't give it to us, but I hope you enjoyed the long feature interview with Stevie Magee, and I think that's been a podcast long enough for this week. A rather long one for you. Hope you've enjoyed it. We're back with another one next week. Do hope you can download, join us, listen, stream, however you listen to the programme. Hopefully you'll listen to another one next week.